Hey, this dish is called Carbonnade Flamande, and it's my first time ever making it. Why exactly? Well, in this short series, I wanted to try 4 different braised dishes from around the world that I've never made before. And first up is this traditional Flemish beef and onion stew that is commonly served with French fries. Now, for each dish in this series, we're gonna keep track of 2 things. First is the braising framework, which will break down the cut used, the braising liquid, the key aromatic base, and the form factor, so we can understand what makes these dishes taste so good. And secondly, I'm gonna keep track of some home cooking metrics. So things like the number of ingredients, the active time it takes to get the braise ready, the braising time in the oven or on the stove, and for fun, I'm gonna give my personal flavor ranking of each one as well. So by the end of this series, we're gonna have a lot to compare and contrast with some continuity throughout each dish. And to start, let's break down the braising framework and see what makes Carbonnade Flamande unique. First up, we have the cut of meat, and this one uses beef. I'm gonna be using a chuck roast today because it breaks down beautifully, but any stew meat, brisket, shank, or even game like elk or venison would all respond really well to this long, slow beer braise. And that brings us to component 2, the braising liquid. And this is part of what makes Carbonnade Flamande unique. The braising liquid is a mix of beef stock and beer. And the choice of beer you use does matter. So many recipes use different types of beer, but in general, there are kind of 2 or 3 traits you're looking for. First is they're darker in color, typically from amber or to a deep brown. Secondly, the beers are malt forward, not hop forward. So you want kind of bready, fruity, raisin, caramel, or toffee notes, no IPA bitterness or aggressive hoppy aromas. And lastly, you want something smooth and slightly sweet. A touch of sweetness from the beer helps balance the beef, onions, and aromatics and makes the whole thing come together. And obviously, if you can find a Belgian double, triple, or quadruple, that would be the most traditional, and it's what I'm gonna be using today. This beer is St. Bernardus ABT 12, which is a quadruple style beer that is brewed and bottled in the West Flemish hop district in Belgium. And here's the description on the bottle. Quote, "It has a very fruity aroma that is a result of using our unique yeast. It brims over with different complex tastes and stands out through its long, bittersweet finish. It is an ideal partner for rich beef dishes and recipes with game." So after we cook down the onions, this beer is going to get reduced down with them, and this reduction becomes the core flavor base of the entire braise, which will then top up with the remaining beef stock. So the beer you choose here absolutely matters. It's what gives Carbonade that deep, slightly sweet and malty backbone that's going to pair beautifully with our aromatics. So the core remaining aromatic ingredients are onions, garlic, thyme, bay leaf, and a little bacon. But really the heart of the aromatics are the onions. We're gonna sweat down a large amount of them until they start to brown and caramelize just a bit. And that sweetness paired with the beef is gonna create that signature flavor profile as this slowly stews down in the oven. And that brings us to the form factor. So this dish would be great served as a stew with bread or a side of mashed potatoes, but what drew me in was the fact that it's also commonly served with French fries, and this is what I'm gonna be doing today. The French fries should give us a little bit crispy, and mixed in with the beef is gonna create this beautiful textural contrast. And obviously, as with all braising dishes, there can be tons of variations in what I just outlined. For example, I saw some recipes that use different types of beer, some use more spices, some add mustard, or others use gingerbread on top instead of some sugar. And obviously, you can follow those recipes to a T if you want to, but the beauty of understanding the framework components is that you can also now look around at your fridge, freezer, and pantry and see what ingredients you may have that will fit the framework and make your own version. So now I'm gonna make my version with this beer and a couple of the other ingredients, and we're also gonna start keeping track of those metrics. The prep time, the braising time, the ingredients used, and I'm gonna give my final taste test and flavor ranking at the end. So let's cook. Okay, I am so excited for this first one, so let's cook. So as I kind of already outlined, here is gonna be our braising cut. We'll chop that up in a second. These are kind of the aromatic base. We need to start chopping the onions and the garlic. I did chop the bacon just because it was easier to grab a photo of it when it was in a container. And then obviously we kind of have our braising liquid here and here, and we're just gonna do our prep work up here and then we'll shift back to the stove. And overall, I mean, I think braising truly is one of those, like, just from all aspects of like life and cooking, braising is one of those things that I think we should do more of. Because you can set it up like it's the morning right now, and then later this afternoon or evening, I'm gonna be greeted by this beautiful Carbonnade Flamande. Hopefully I'm saying it right throughout the video. And you know, it's gonna take not much effort up front, but we're gonna be greeted by something just beautifully delicious at the end, and something I get to look forward throughout the day as I'm kind of going and working on some other things. And, you know, it's that kind of delayed gratification, if you will, which I think is always worth the payoff, especially during the cold winter months as well. So to finish out the onion, I grabbed out a bowl for the scraps and then removed the outside paper from them before cutting them in half and across again into thin rings. And while this may look like a lot of onions, you have to remember, onions are about 90% water, and we're going to cook them down quite a bit in the Dutch oven. So after transferring the sliced onions to a bowl, I also smashed a couple of cloves of garlic, and in total this took about 4 minutes for the vegetables, and after taking another 30-second break to wipe my onion tears away, we're ready for the beef. Okay, I think I'm back. Eyes are probably a little red, but it's fine. For the beef, this is just a chuck roast that I'm gonna cube up. You could definitely just cut this whole if you wanted to, or braise it whole rather. It seems like most of the recipes tend to use stew meat or, you know, like a cut up chuck roast of some sort. And I kind of like the idea of having like cubes for this dish, so I figured let's go ahead and do that. So nothing special here. Just gonna do, I'm gonna do thicker, kind of meatier ones just because that's kind of what I'm envisioning in my head. I don't wanna do super small ones. So I don't know, something like that. And then I'm gonna toss it into this bowl. And then we'll add some salt, pepper, and a little flour and brown these up. Okay, so got the beef chopped up here, and then into this is gonna be a big sprinkle of salt. I had to wash my hands so I could crank this pepper real quick. Then we're gonna do probably, I don't know, 25 or 30 cranks of black pepper, which I might need to reload this thing. Yeah, I think I'm about out. And then last but not least is just some flour, which is kind of it just depends on if you want to add the flour or not. You could definitely brown it without the flour. In theory, it should help thicken up the sauce a little bit too. But again, you don't have to do that with flour. You could do that with cornstarch at the end. We'll kind of see as we go. I'm not necessarily always the biggest fan of using flour because I feel like browning flour versus browning just the beef does have a slightly different flavor. One's not inherently better or worse, but I feel like most of the ones that I looked at used flour, so. Okay, so we have that ready, and then we'll shift back here to braise. Okay, so back at the stove, I have this just heating up here, and then we're going to brown up our beef cubes, and probably just do it into little batches here. Then we need to just caramelize down the onions, which I will not make you guys watch me caramelize onions for, 40 to 60 minutes, but we will quickly just do our beef. To brown the beef, I just place them down into that hot oil and let it sear for about 2 minutes. And as you can see, we really get that nice darker color from the Maillard reaction on the exterior. So I flip the pieces of beef over and then let them sear for another 60 seconds or so before swapping out to the second batch. And then while I am waiting this, I'm gonna pour out kind of my braising liquid and just get like a loose idea of what I'm trying to do here. So it does depend on what beer you do. So I was looking around at different ones, and I think I stumbled upon like a Reddit post where people were asking like what beer people use, and this was kind of the top one that was on there. And it is says this is like a brewery from the West Flemish district where this is from. So I figured it'd be a good one to do. And I'm gonna do roughly like a 2 to 1 part of this beer. And this is all gonna concentrate down, and this is already concentrated, so I don't wanna use a ton. I did a terrible pouring job on that. Smells so good though, like kind of fruity dark beer. This is good. In total, it took about 7 minutes to brown all of the beef, and as you can see, we're gonna have plenty of brown bits left behind in the pan that we're gonna pick back up when we cook the onions. Okay, so that took about 7 or so minutes to get that beef browned. Then next, we're gonna come in with our bacon, which is gonna be, a good fat source. And then I also am going to add just a little pat of butter to go along with it. And then we're gonna make sure we have this heat down to low. So butter and the bacon in there, starting to smell beautiful. Then we're just gonna toss in all of the onions and the garlic. So this probably looks like a ton of onions, but it is literally gonna cook down to probably a third or a quarter of the size. So I'm gonna slowly start to sweat these first by just putting the lid on, and then I'll meet you back here in probably 45 minutes or so once they're cooked down, and then we'll just finish the braise, add the beef back in, add our marinades and the braising liquid, then it's ready for the oven. Okay, so it's been about 45 minutes, and as you can see, these onions have cooked down so much in just that time. Now, you could absolutely cook these for another 30, 60, 2 hours if you wanted to, but at this point, the onions are completely broken down. They are super sweet and delicious. So now to finish the braise, we just have a couple of ingredients to add. So first up, we are going to throw in, this is the beer. And so I'm just bringing this quickly up to a simmer, and then we're gonna reduce all of this down. So as I simmer this beer, a few things are gonna start to happen. First, most of the alcohol will start to evaporate away at around 172 degrees Fahrenheit. As we continue up, the water will evaporate at 212 degrees, and additionally, some of those lighter aromas from the beer are gonna kind of blow off, but very importantly, everything else will become concentrated. So the sugars, the heavy rich aromas like the bready and yeasty ones, and this really creates the backbone of this dish as it mixes with those onions. Okay, so after 4 or 5 minutes or so, you can see that we've definitely reduced down maybe by about a half or a third. So we're just gonna toss in the remaining components. So back in with our brown beef. Then a little bit of some cane sugar. You could use brown sugar as well. A little bit of some apple cider vinegar. And then our aromatics are going to be some thyme. This is fresh thyme that I just took off the stem. And then 1 bay leaf as well. And then the last thing to do is just top it up with beef stock. Again, just trying to go over to the top, but I want to leave a little bit of space so that beef can kind of brown on top as it sits and continues to braise. And now we are ready to braise. You could obviously just do this on the stovetop low and slow. What I like doing is just tossing it into the oven, letting it go at like 275 or 300 for, 5 to 6 hours, and then we'll see where it is, and I'll meet you back then. All right, so now that this thing is in the oven, let's take a quick look at our cut up numbers. And in total, the prep time is likely gonna take you around an hour or a bit more. And you might be a little faster or slower than me, but most of this time is really just from sweating down those onions very slowly, during which you can be doing dishes, watching a show, or whatever. Or honestly, you could even do that step ahead of time if you wanted to. Now, for the ingredients, I'm using 15 for the braise itself, but we'll also be adding french fries and parsley at the end, so it's going to bring our total to around 17. And as you can see, a lot of these ingredients are really pantry staples and spices, stuff you probably already have. The fresh stuff like the chuck roast you're going to need to buy. And then the Belgian ale might really be the only specialty item you need to track down, but I do think it's going to be worth it in our final taste test. Then our braising time is going to be 4 to 6 hours. You can do longer or shorter. So let's finish this braise, make some fries, and then get to the taste test. So this isn't done yet, but I stopped to give it a quick stir just before I grab a workout, and I just had to say, this smells incredible so far. Also, I think I'm gonna take off the lid for the last, hour or two, just so we can develop a little bit more browning on top as it continues to reduce down. Okay, so the braise is done, just sitting in the oven to keep warm. Last thing we gotta do is serve this with some french fries. So I'm just gonna toss some french fries into the air fryer, and then we'll do our taste test. Okay, so fries, nice and crunchy and hot. Oh my goodness. This looks incredible. Okay, so the moment I've been waiting for all day is here. Let's give this my first ever taste test. This is gonna be good. Wow, I am having a tough time composing myself. Absolutely mouth-wateringly delicious. I mean, the meat is fall apart tender. Obviously, we braised it. But then the sweetness you get from the onions is just so concentrated and really, really nice. Then you mix that in with kind of those aromas that you get from the beer, the fruity, floral, yeasty, dark beer notes. Everything works together. And then you pair it with some crispy French fries. It's just incredible. Everyone needs to try this. Okay, so while I plow through the rest of this bowl, let's quickly do a recap and break down my final rankings for this first braised dish. And we absolutely started off with a bang. So where does Carbonnade Flamande rank? Well, I'm gonna give this an 8.6 out of 10. And honestly, this is likely a very high score for me in this series. It'll be interesting to see if something else beats it. It's been about 2 days for now, and honestly, the leftovers are just as good when it's fresh out of the oven. And I really just love the whole flavor profile here. You get that braised beer, beef, and onions that mix with the contrast of the crispy French fries and that little pop of parsley. It just works. So yeah, 8.6 is probably gonna be hard to beat. Also, a quick note, we did a small run of these hoodies. They're super heavy, warm, perfect for braising season. And if you want one, they're up on the website to check out. But anyway, I appreciate you guys watching. This first episode has got me fired up for the recipe series. So I'll see you all back here in episode 2. Peace, y'all.